Welcome to my tutorial for Ninja Gaiden for the arcade. This is the harder US ROM of the arcade game. There's also it's also known as Shadow Warriors in Europe and Japan, I believe, and that's apparently an easier version. I haven't seen many completions online of the US version. I did see a few 1cc runs by players that obviously mastered the game. But aside from that, I've seen mostly cheated playthroughs with infinite lives, or they had the default lives maxed out instead of and the health maxed out from the dip switches. I'm just playing with the default lives and health, and I managed to beat the game in about 3 hours and 52 minutes. I didn't have any real problems difficulty wise until I got to the last stage. So most of those hours were spent on that final stage, mainly the first checkpoint of the final stage. So I'm going to get into all the details of what I did and my strategies for that. So in my review, I'll go into more of the details and my thoughts on the game. But basically, you have a punch combo and you have a throw move, or your basic two attacks. So you can do the punch and kick combo just by mashing the attack button until the enemy falls down like that. And that's I would consider that a full, punch and kick combo, because you can kind of lock the guys into it until they go down. That said, doing a full punch and kick combo until the guy is knocked down is about the equivalent to using your throw and throwing the enemy. So your throw is going to be the fastest way to deal equivalent damage that you would get from a punch and kick combo. You can deal the same amount of damage with the throw as you can with one punch and kick combo. So the throw is the quicker way to deal out damage. But, sometimes it's hard to get off because you have to kind of plan where you're going to land from the throw, and you may get hit when you land. So it can be a little bit harder to use sometimes. It just depends on the situation. Now, for these first, for most of the game, you're not going to see refined gameplay, but I'm going to, I'll try to explain what I could have done better, because remember, I was still learning the game as I was playing through these other stages. The only stage where I had to really refine my gameplay was on that final stage. So all these other stages are pretty much me learning the game and not really knowing the best methods for everything. But I think it'll be good enough, because a lot of these bosses, most of them will reappear in the final stage, and I have very good strats for them, so I will just explain those same strats when they appear in the regular stages. I know that those strats would work on those parts, so. And the other thing is that there's a bunch of barrels and shit like that in the environment. To open those, you have to knock an enemy into those barrels or whatever items they are, and it'll break open. And then you can get whatever's in there. You can either knock an enemy into it, throw an enemy into it, or if you get hit into it, you'll break it open. And there's a few different types of things that you can break open. Sometimes the signs will break open sometimes. You see that sign right there that looks like a Pepsi sign. It is good to try to knock enemies into those things so that you can, get the power-ups, which are sometimes useful. Sometimes you'll get some health back, or sometimes you'll get the swords, which allow you to really mow down the enemies. The sword, I believe the way the sword damage works when you pick up the sword, it's for I think it's a limited amount of time, or a limited amount of strikes, either or, but the damage on it seems equivalent to a full punch and kick combo every time you hit an enemy. It'll knock an enemy down instantly with each hit, and the damage seems to be equivalent to if you did a full, combo on the enemy and knocked them down or threw them. So I think that's how the damage works with that. Now, there's not going to be a lot to say on the regular stages, because the game is very forgiving until you get to the final stage. So you get a lot of checkpoints, and you have unlimited continue. So if you get to an area and then you waste all your lives, you'll just start at the last checkpoint you got to, and you'll have all your lives back. The game defaults to, I believe, maybe 2 lives. But in the dip switches, you can set it up to 4 lives, I believe. And your health defaults in the dip switch at 3 cubes of health. And you can set it up to 5. Early on, the enemies don't deal massive damage from what I remember, but on the final stage, it gets very cheap where you suddenly take a lot of damage from enemies. Some of them can nearly one-hit kill you, and the checkpoint, there's only one checkpoint in the whole stage, so it makes you go for a long time before you can get a checkpoint, and you take a lot of damage. You really have to play well in the final stage, and that's really where the tutorial, I found positionings and things like that I haven't seen anywhere else. I think it'll be really useful, and it should make the final stage much easier to complete for those who can't beat this game. Apparently there was people who had trouble completing the game. I saw in a video someone said they could only beat it on 2-player mode, which I think is very forgiving. But here I'm going to show you how you can do it solo. And of course, most of the time not having any of the power-ups, unless I get them in the environment. But most of the time the only things that I get are maybe some health replenishment. I don't get the sword too often. So this part is just a little bit irritating. You have to cross traffic, so try to get through the best you can without getting hit. But you don't have to get too far until you activate the next checkpoint. So in this tutorial, I'm really just going to be explaining, how to just beat the game checkpoint to checkpoint. Strategies for a 1cc run without using any continues, of course, would be very different. But I didn't refine the playthrough to that degree. But I did refine the final stage. I got the final stage down pretty damn well. I pretty much had to beat it. So I think that's going to be what's really, going to be the most useful part. I also got a 1-up a little bit earlier. If you get that ninja power-up, that'll give you an extra life. Which, it can be useful if you're just trying to make it to the next checkpoint and you're having trouble with the checkpoint. I don't know if the 1-up is always there. Some power-ups, it seems like they just appear, randomly, and some of them seem more like they appear more often. Like, there was a sword power-up I remember in one area where it wouldn't always appear, but it seemed to appear pretty frequently. So I don't know if some of them have higher chances of appearing in certain boxes, or if it's just random. I'm really not sure about that. But yeah, the main strategy for normally fighting guys is going to be like most beat-em-ups that I've said in a lot of my beat-em-up tutorials, is that you're going to get slightly above or slightly below the enemy, and you want them to have to walk down to you. You want them to kind of come down you on a diagonal angle if possible. But as long as they're coming down to you or up to your position, you can hit them as they're just coming up to try to hit you. That does trick enemies in a lot of these old beat-em-up games. It makes it very hard for them to get the first hit. So you're going to want to constantly be doing that. Just it should just be like an instinct with these type of beat-em-up games. To do well in them, you want to be doing that at all times. Rarely will I try to approach an enemy head-on and strike the enemy. I'm usually trying to have them come to me from, above or below a little bit. Or I may approach them as well, but I'll do it from an angle, from either below them or above them. So the throw, the way it works is you have a button that makes you jump, as you can see. And as you're jumping, the best way to be consistent with your throws is to mash the punch button rapidly. It'll give you a good chance of grabbing the enemy in midair. Otherwise, you may miss it. But what I did was I set my punch button to rapid fire on my joystick, and I just I hold it down while I'm airborne, and it makes the throws very consistent. So that definitely helps if you have a rapid fire controller. Definitely not a requirement though, but it can help. It's not too useful for the punch and kick combos though, as you may end up doing extra punch and kicks that you don't mean to do, since the punches and kicks in this game are pretty slow. Hit detection is a little weird. For these motorcycle guys, you can try to throw them off the motorcycle. That's probably the easiest way to get them off. But as long as you keep progressing to the right and make it to the bosses, you should be at the next checkpoint once you get to these two bosses here. I believe that's the final checkpoint for the stage. And if you lose all your lives, like I said, you will start back at the last checkpoint you got to. So, whether you lose lives or continues, the difference with losing lives is that you respawn right where you died when you lose a life. But when you lose both of your lives, Then you go out to the continue screen, then you'll be at whatever the checkpoint was that you got to. Each stage usually has several checkpoints, aside from the final stage, which I believe only has one checkpoint. So they try to fuck you over when you get to the end with that. So these two guys, you're not going to see me demonstrate it well here because I wasn't familiar with the game, to that degree. But the idea with these guys, these boss enemies, is to get either above or below them, and you want to be really tightly positioned close to their body so that when they come up, you're punching them basically in the fucking balls. You want to be like right above or below them. You don't want to have a gap. You don't want to have a horizontal space between you and these big guys, or they'll do that. See how he's kicking the shit out of me and, destroying me. In the last stage, if they do that, they'll pretty much almost kill you in one kick combo. You'll just die. So you don't want to have this like large spacing. This is very sloppy the way I'm playing here. See with these large spaces? This is what not to do. So if you want to see how to do it properly, obviously check my footage of the final stage where you'll see a really... I do half of the stage like no damage, so I have it down pretty well. But that's not the place to see how to execute that properly. But you can learn from that and don't play like that. You want to get either above or below them, and you want to have very little horizontal space between you and the bosses. And you want to try to isolate them and take them out one at a time. You don't want to fight them when they're together or with other enemies. And of course, before you deal with those two guys, you should focus on clearing out the minions first. You can kill the minions first. Preferably by throwing them, because every time you throw them, it's faster to just throw the enemies. Instead of trying to stand there and punch all the enemies, it takes longer. So whenever there's bosses around, I would say focus on throwing the enemies instead of trying to do punch combos. So for here, you got to get up in this area. Now there is another control. There's a third button in the game that I didn't mention, and it's basically an action button that allows you to grapple onto certain handholds. Basically handlebar type of things. And there's only a few of them in the environments. And I believe that was one of them where I had to grab onto that circular thing and let it rise up, and then you jump off. It's a little weird the way it controls with that, but if you press that action button, you will latch on to it if you're close enough. Same with the handlebars, which I'm actually going to be using heavily in the final stage. I didn't realize how important those things were to use. So you're probably going to see me not using them a lot in the early game, or in all of the game aside from the final stage. The helicopter guys are not too hard. You can try to combo them, and then you can just juggle them in a corner by constantly kicking. Or I believe you can use your throws to throw them off too, but I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly. As you can see, like with most beat-em-ups, you can't break the barrels by punching them or anything. You have to either get knocked into them or knock enemies into them. It's kind of weird. Now, these log guys are probably the most dangerous enemies in the game with the big log. You're not going to see how dangerous they are at this point because they don't do that much damage, but in the final stage, when they hit you with the log, it does 2 pieces of health damage, which nearly kills you. So, getting hit by them is pretty much... not something you want to do. But here, of course, I didn't have it down, and I was just playing very sloppy. Now, if you get the swords, now you can do a full combo's worth of damage in one swipe. So it's equivalent to throwing the enemy or doing a full punch kick combo. But you see, I still wasn't very proficient at luring the guys and getting the first hits on the guys, and that's just something that came with time. That was part of the hours of failing on the final stage as well. I learned how to, just play better in general, as well as just learning all the spawn positioning and all the different, manipulating the AI and everything on the final stage. But now if I went back and played the game with everything I learned on the final stage, I would be able to play much better just because I would the game is very similar. There's only like a few different enemy types. So once you've dealt with a few crowds and you know how to do it consistently, you can play much better. But I didn't go back to do all that because this wasn't a refined tutorial, but the final stage is going to be refined, and you'll see that. I think that will help anyone who's having trouble. Most players will probably be able to get to the final stage because, like I said, the checkpoints are very forgiving. I mean, it can be a little challenging, but if you keep at it, you should be able to break through. I didn't really have any major issues at all for the rest of the game until I got to the final stage. I actually played this game first on the original Xbox. It was an unlockable in Ninja Gaiden or Ninja Gaiden Black, one of those games on Xbox, which I played the shit out of. I have hundreds of hours on those. But I unlocked this arcade game and I probably played it first on there with the original Xbox controller, and there was no saves or anything, like as far as save states that I could practice sections or anything like I would do now. So I got stuck probably on the final stage. I was never able to beat it back then. So I wanted to go back to this one. For these guys, I like to flip around, to the sides of them left and right until I can grab them and throw them. But I wasn't doing it too well here, and I'm going to show it better on the final stage. The best way to throw guys in general is to be a little bit, below or above them, like I said, with trying to hit guys that are approaching you from above or below. You want to be out of you don't want to be directly in their horizontal plane, basically. You want to be a little bit above or a little bit below, and then you can throw them pretty easily without them even hitting you. But see, I'm not doing it here. I'm playing very sloppy. Obviously, it shows that I don't know what I'm doing because but I had enough lives to bullshit my way through, so I wasn't playing super clean, nor did I know exactly how to do the throws the best at this point. It can be annoying when you flip off of shit in the environment, because if you walk towards a wall or an item, like a barrel or something, you will walk up it. So it has some irritating controls with that. Now, if you're right in the corner, you may not be able to grab the guy to throw him, so you may just want to stick with a punch-kick combo. But I'm going to illustrate that way better later when those claw guys appear in the final stage, because you do have to fight two of the bosses over again in the final stage. So I'll be able to explain those better. I have a very clean execution of those bosses. It's pretty much the exact same fight again, so that is really the best place for me to explain it, where I can actually show what I'm talking about instead of telling you what I should have been doing. Because basically that's what most of this is going to be, is just saying what I should have been fucking doing, because like I said, I didn't know the game at this point. Now the way this is edited is I show only my successful lives, my successful continues, where I made some kind of progress to the next checkpoint. So I edited out all the excess continues where I didn't get to the next checkpoint. That's all edited out. And that's the same as my playthrough that I posted up that doesn't have commentary, except there's one difference in this footage. I edited, I actually inserted my best run of the first checkpoint on the final stage. I inserted that. That was from my failed attempts and my practice and shit. It wasn't actually the way that I actually ended up breaking through. But I just put that there just to show, basically just to show, how it should look. So yeah, it was just for demonstration, since I wanted to show, a well executed section. I mean, the other section was well executed, but I had a section that was a little bit better, so I just went with that. So yeah, again, we're fighting all the same types of enemies, which is mostly what the game is. So you can only explain the strategies for fighting the same groups of enemies over and over again so many times. There really won't be that much to say about that. Aside from, like I said, it's not really necessarily what I'm doing here, because like I said, I didn't really know the game that well, but you want to try to be a little bit above or below them and have them walk into your punches and kicks. I usually start my punches and kicks a little bit early. So I'll be mashing those buttons a little bit early so they walk into it. But see, throws can be very effective. But here I got fucked, so now we'll see how to do it the right way. But it's still going to be kind of sloppy. Whenever you can line up multiple guys into the same hits, obviously, it's a good thing to try to get guys in a single line. You see how good this is working. They're all going up into this single line because they're blocked off by those tombstones. So, whenever you can channel the enemies into a single plane, that's something I end up doing a lot on the final stage. So that's actually a useful strategy. It's not 100% effective, but it will break through eventually. Using stuff like boxes and shit, like these corners, it forces the enemies to come up to where you are. And again, it kind of channels them into your punches and kicks. So this was effectively using the environment. So this part was well done. Because there's a lot of fucking enemies here. This part's kind of hard. But with this strategy, you can really thin them out. See, there's still a lot of fucking enemies, though. This may be one of the harder areas, actually, without having a sword power up, which you can get sometimes. But this area does have a lot of enemies. But see, now I got the sword. Maybe for this area you're supposed to have the sword. Maybe it's always in there. I'm not sure. But you see how fast I lost the sword anyway, so... we'll see if I actually ended up getting through this. I think I did. Yeah, I got some life back. But you can see this was very... This was like... I barely beat this part on this attempt. But I guess I got through somehow. I think you're really intended to have the sword and just chop through these guys, which would make it a lot easier. But, you know, it can be a little hard to keep it with this many fucking enemies everywhere. But yeah, it looks like I barely got through this. So this section, I could see this being hard. It didn't take me a ton of attempts, but it definitely doesn't look easy. Now for this part, I didn't understand the controls exactly with the platforming, but you use the action button to grab onto the branches. They're similar to the handlebar or the monkey bars. So you just use the grab button or whatever to grab onto that. And then the control is a little weird, but I believe you hit the... once you grab on... You see, I didn't really know what I was doing. Once you grab on, I think you used your jump attack button to swing to the next branch, if I remember right. This is the only part where you have to do some weird fucking platforming, and it is awkward. But once you figure out the control, I mean, it's not bad. It's just I didn't really understand exactly how to launch off properly. I think it may be the jump button. Then you may have to hit the action button again to re-grab onto the branch. But I don't remember because this was the only part in the game that was like this. But you may have to experiment with those controls to get it right. But after you get across here, I think you have to do one more series of these jumps, and then you get the checkpoint, if I remember right. But actually, yeah, you can skip it, I remember. You can go up here and skip the next section of jumps, which I would recommend doing. I mean, I don't really like the branch jumping. You do have to deal with more enemies up here, but... and it is a really narrow space, so it is kind of dangerous, but you can kind of try to bullshit your way through here. And try to walk through if you can. You see, I barely squeezed through here. But this is the checkpoint after that. Once you go down here where these sumo wrestlers are, you'll get the checkpoint. Now, these guys don't appear on the final stage, but... I mean, they're very similar to pretty much all the bosses in the game, which is basically just being a little bit below or above, like with the regular enemies. That's pretty much one of the main strategies. But of course, I'm going all out aggressive because I didn't really have these parts down. So I'm just kind of just busting through when I play. You know, it's sloppy. So really, like I said, the final stage is really the only part that's going to be helpful. I figured I would do commentary over the full game though, just to explain everything. I wanted to keep the Lost Continues in only because I wanted to show where the checkpoints were. You know, I didn't want it to be completely edited cleanly because then, you know, my health is going to be coming back magically and it's not going to look right. It's going to be confusing. So I figured I would at least, you know, show my first, loss of a continue on a new checkpoint. But yeah, really this part, it shouldn't be that hard, you know what I mean? But like I said, I didn't really have the game down. But the techniques you see me using on the final stage with the bosses is going to be similar to what I would have done on that part. You know, had I known the game better. So whenever you have guys climbing down to get to you, it's an easy opportunity to get in free punch and kick combos. I didn't execute it too well there as I got interrupted, but you can pull a lot of bullshit with that if you do it right. You'll see me utilize that. All these things that I'm talking about that I should have done, you'll see me do them on the final stage. I believe there's a handlebar there on that sign. You may be able to grab onto that sign and kick the guys. I wasn't using those monkey bars at all, pretty much for the whole game. I never really used them. But they actually, when you get on those monkey bars and kick, you actually do a full combo's worth of damage, similar to the sword. So it does do a lot of damage, and you can pretty much face any direction you need to take out guys. You can just pivot and change direction, and you can clear out a lot of guys that way. It would have made things a lot easier, I think. I'm guessing I could have done that. Here's another area that you should be able to grab onto. It looks like another monkey bar type of area. That would have made clearing out these guys much easier as well. You know, had I known what I know now, I would have used that to clear out all the enemies. But I'll show exactly what I mean once the last stage comes up. Most of these enemies probably would have been dead if I would have used those monkey bars. I see. Now I think I may be starting to use it, perhaps. I mean, it would have made this part so much easier. Now, it can be hard to get on there initially when you're mobbed by enemies. I was actually using a foot pedal for this game to load states really fast on the emulator, which means I can reset to the checkpoint real fast. Resetting just means instead of committing suicide and waiting for all my lives to drain, I can just reset back to the checkpoint with, you know, the way the game would have put me there if I died. And it just makes it much better because I can, if I take damage on a part that I shouldn't be taking damage on, I can just reset to the checkpoint. So I was using a foot pedal to do that, and I was also using it to practice some sections on the final stage. But yeah, I just got that foot pedal. It's actually extremely useful because normally I have to constantly take my hands off the controller to hit the keyboard. And when you're reloading rapidly, it's just a pain in the ass. It makes it a lot more frustrating. So that was a huge convenience, and that was the first game I used it on, but it works awesome. When I show a room setup, that's one of the things that I'll show in that video, and I may make separate videos on some of the more nuanced things like the joysticks and the controllers. I did some joystick mods and things like that. I was mostly using a joystick for this game. I've been switching over to joystick for a lot of games. This part can be hard with all these ninjas that mob you. But again, I really should have cleared out the earlier guys, you know, using the handlebars or the monkey bars. But I remember this part was actually kind of hard because there's a lot of these white ninjas you have to take out, and the motorcycle guys can be irritating too. And I didn't really master this part, so I don't have any great tips for it aside from, you know, the same general tips of how to deal with enemies. But I don't have any like great or easy method for this part. Try to isolate the enemies, obviously. You don't want to fight them when they're all together. Eventually this part does end. Now here I think you can, I fucked it up there, but I think I got the checkpoint. Yeah, so I got the checkpoint. But what I could have done, I probably could have just went up on those tracks and you know, took off to the next checkpoint. I probably didn't have to try to fight these guys. So I'd recommend trying that first. You'll get the checkpoint as long as you make it over here to this area where that log guy is at. So this part definitely gets crowded. It's kind of hard to flip through here and get to the end. But you could just take damage and try to run through to all the way to the right. I think you can get the next checkpoint by doing that, and you probably don't even have to kill all these guys. I may end up doing that. I think that's what I ended up doing. I mean, you might take a lot of hits, but you can probably bust through. Luckily, these guys don't do massive damage like they do on the final stage. So, I mean, you can definitely take some hits. Just drop down here, and this should get you the next checkpoint without having to kill all the guys. So, I recommend just bypassing those guys. Don't even fight them if you can avoid it. You might have to kind of throw your way through a little bit and jump through, but... Of course, now I'm probably going to die because I lured the entire fucking crew down here with the bosses, so it's pretty much, you know, a fuck fest. So I don't know if I get through this. But I did get the checkpoint, so it doesn't really matter. So once I die here, then I can, start with a fresh set of lives and health. I'm guessing I don't know. I'm guessing I'm probably not going to get through this, but maybe I will. If not, you'll see where the checkpoint is. It's right at the bosses. These guys are usually very, very fucking easy to deal with, but when you have, fucking 6 or 7 regular enemies in there with the bosses in a small area, it's not good. But now when you get the checkpoint, you have a more reasonable 2 minions, it looks like, with the bosses, which is not bad. You can take them out first just to make things easier. Try to take them out first. All the regular enemies will die after 2 combos, which is either 2 throws or 2 full punch kick combos that knock them down. They all have pretty much the same amount of health. The bosses may take 5 or 6 knockdowns to kill, which includes either the throw or the punch kick combo. I find it a little awkward to toss the bosses around for these bigger guys. I just don't do it that way. I usually either move up or down and have them come to me, but you're not seeing it here because, like I said, this was before I really had to learn the game. But I believe the next stage may be the final stage. If not, it's coming up very soon. So you're going to see the gameplay gets much, much cleaner in the next stage. And that's because I probably spent most of that, nearly 4 hours on the game. I spent most of that on the final stage. So, I was forced to really learn it because you take so much damage. So now I'll try to detail everything I did. Very specific strategies for this part. The positioning is very specific, so you're going to want to pay attention to how I do it. So in the beginning here, my goal is to take out these log guys or heavily damage them as much as possible before I get to those monkey bars. So either I'm going to try to throw each one twice to kill it. I may get a punch and kick combo occasionally, but I want to try to take them out before I get to these handlebars. Now I get on these handlebars and I just start kicking in the direction of the enemies that are approaching me. Basically, if you rapidly kick in the direction that the enemies are approaching, most of the time you'll get them. Aside from the log guys actually, if they're too far away, if you try to use the handlebars, they will get you. And if they hit you, they do twice as much. They do two pieces of health damage out of your 3 health, so they nearly kill you in one hit. So here I lure this guy by the statue and I kick him into the box. Which, if there's a good power up in there, I can get that. Then I just throw him to finish him off. Now I just deal with the guys up here. I throw them into the barrel so that if there's a power up, so I can get some health back. So that's helpful. Now I just get back on these monkey bars here, and I can just take out all the enemies as they come down, which is very easy to do. You just switch directions as needed. It makes it very easy. So for this part, there's going to be some AI manipulation with the spawn as far as getting the enemies where I want them to be. So I'm just going to inch the screen. So you can see me just inching the screen a little bit. And now I have basically what I want here. I want these enemies to come from the right side. They won't always do that. It depends how far you move. But by inching the screen, you can have them come off the right side. Then I take out that first guy. And unfortunately, I made the bosses aggressive, which I don't really want to do. If you do it right, you can take out both enemies before the bosses get aggressive. You may want to practice that with save states to get it right. But it's not too bad dealing with just one guy. You just throw him twice and you're done. And then for these guys, you see, this is the proper way to fight them. You get in really close and you go either up or below them and have them come down to you. And you want to be really tightly positioned close to their body. You don't want to have a gap. If you have any kind of gap between these guys, if it's a little bit much of a gap, you're going to get hit by their kick, which does 2 damage. It nearly kills you. So just keep that in mind. If you stay tight to them, up or down, but very tightly positioned, close to their body, you should be able to get them every time by mashing your attack button. So now for this part, get on these monkey bars. This part's very easy if you do it right. And you want to hit these guys, as they drop down or approach you from whatever direction, you can hit them. Same as before. And then you just want to go up here and do the same thing, but just inch the screen. Don't move too far, because you don't want to lose the, you don't want to knock, if you go too far, you'll take the monkey bar off screen. You can't use it. So you don't want to do that. Just inch the screen and have the enemies come to you. If you do it carefully, you can get all the enemies pretty much to come to you. Now, once you clear out all these enemies and get to the boss area, you're going to get your first and only checkpoint for this stage. So you have to do all that on your set of 2 lives. So it's very, very hard. But with all the positioning shit I just showed you, it should be a lot easier to pull off. So again, use the handlebars. Now, one thing I don't think I showed in this tutorial that would have been useful is how to fight your way through the checkpoint here. Because if you get the checkpoint here, you're not gonna have the handlebars to use, the monkey bars. And there's actually a trick I use to take out the mob of enemies where I position myself behind a barrel. And I'm not sure if I ended up showing it here. Actually, I think I do. I think I do, because I think I'm going to end up dying here, and then I can show how to do it on a fresh checkpoint, which is really important. So you can watch me die on this. I think I do get killed. Yeah, that's good. So now I'll show you how to do it from a fresh checkpoint. Get behind this barrel. The positioning is very specific. If you do it right, though, you can take out this entire mob of enemies with this single positioning. And I'm going to show you how to do this rest of the stage with no damage at all. So this was a very clean execution when I beat it. It doesn't always work for me, probably because maybe I didn't get the positioning right on the barrel. You have to be pretty precisely positioned. And I don't know that it's 100% guaranteed, but it didn't take me too long to break through with that again. So I recommend that strat. Position behind the barrel just like that. It makes the enemy so they have to go around the barrel, and then you're hitting them as they're coming around. It's very specific, but it works. Now here's some more positioning bullshit you can pull. Go all the way to the left, and you will lure all these guys behind this table. So now creep out a bit, and you can lure them out one at a time. These guys take 4 knockdowns each, so either 4 throws or 4 punch kick combos. But I don't recommend punch kicking these guys. I recommend only throwing these guys. So they take 4 each, so having all 3 of them out at once is much harder. I've done it before, but it is much harder to deal with. I recommend using this strat. I probably shouldn't even detail my other strat, because this is the way to do it. The other strat would be to, again, try to keep them either above or below you and have them come up to you so you can throw them. That would be the strat. And you try to manage them all at once, all 3 of them at once. And you pretty much have to pull off 12 knockdowns on them to kill them all. So it's tough to do when they're all... Dealing with 2 of them at once is easier than dealing with 3 for sure. I probably could have done it so that I only did like 1 at a time, using that strat. You could try to modify that and try to do it better. But you get the idea. I ended up taking no damage, so it was still clean. So now this is the final boss coming up. And I found some positioning tricks on the final boss to get 2 free combos on him pretty much. And it only takes 5 combos to defeat him. So you're getting a nice little percentage there of damage. 2 out of 5. So start off by punch kicking in this position where I'm standing. I practiced all this shit with save states to get all these positionings and shits. And then I was able to put it all together, which I recommend doing. Definitely use save states to practice any troublesome sections. So get that first hit in. Now get positioned here by this fish tank. Do the same thing. And those are your 2 free hits. Now, the way it's going to work is you want to be below him, but notice he stands there and doesn't do anything until you get within a certain range. So you want to utilize that when you're either above or below him. You want him to just stand there idle. He's not going to do anything. And then you move down and do a combo. But if he does hit you, it's a 1-hit kill. So you do not want to get hit. But you see how I'm toying with him here? I'm trying to get him in position, and then I move up slightly, and I get that first hit in. And once I get that first hit in, he can't break out of it. So that's the idea. Now, sometimes you may want to reset his positioning. Like if you don't get the first hit in, maybe move down again and have him walk down towards you again, and then move up again and try it again and just keep resetting it. I would do that most of the time. It's not always 100% perfect, but you're getting 2 free combos in out of the 5 you need to kill him. So you only have to pull off 3 successful combos while walking around with him and fucking around. So it shouldn't be too bad. And with those strategies, the final stage, it should be very beatable. And that's really the only part of the game that I would consider a roadblock. So if you have any questions, let me know, and thanks for watching.